I think a lot of men struggle to ask for help. Not because that they don't need it, not because everything is fine, not because they don't have emotions or don't feel things, but because somewhere along the line in their life, a lot of men learn that asking for help or needing help is some form of weakness. And so instead of saying something, they just stay quiet and crack on, keep working, keep training, keep providing, keep pretending they're all right. And from the outside, everything might look pretty good, pretty fine, like they're coping well. But on the inside, they're carrying, heavy things that, they don't really know what to do with. And if this sounds like you, then stick around till, the end of the video, because you might be able to learn something from this, All human beings, and I think especially men, and I can talk to men more because I am a man, inside we might carry stress, anger, shame, pressure, regret, relationship problems, money problems. There might be addiction problems, loneliness. You might have a small social group, or you might just have the feeling that you're falling behind. You might feel deprived in some way. You might be scrolling on the internet and just feel like absolute turds because what seemingly is a perfect life, that every time you scroll on the internet, everybody's living these perfect lives, but you're not. And I think the hardest part is that, for the most part, men don't know how to explain what's wrong. They just know that they don't feel like themselves anymore. And I think, this is one of the reasons that men struggle so much, because they can't articulate what the clear problem is. It's not always, for example, this is the exact thing that's wrong. It's not like when you break your arm's broken, so you can say, my arm's broken, look, it's hanging off, and you can get it fixed. Because it's something in here, the neurons in your brain. Sometimes it's just a slow build-up of things over time. A job that's been draining you, money stress, legal stress, family stress, a failed relationship, a body that doesn't feel the same anymore, a few bad habits that just start getting worse, poor nutrition, poor sleep, all these things can accumulate over time. And eventually, one day you wake up and realise maybe you've just been surviving for months or years. But because you're still functioning, nobody really notices. And because nobody notices, you generally convince yourself that, well, it must not be that serious. So you just keep on going. I've done this to myself more than once, Periods where I've probably been struggling more than I would have liked to admit. I didn't want to say too much because I didn't want to sound weak, Periods where I thought I should just handle this myself. And sometimes that's what you need to do. You just need to handle it yourself. Because personal responsibility matters, discipline matters, resilience matters. But there is a big difference between being responsible and just drowning in your own self-despair. There's a difference between strength and pretending nothing affects you. A lot of men, I'd say, confuse silence with strength. But silence isn't always strength. Sometimes silence is just a fear talking. Fear of being judged, fear of being laughed at, fear of being a burden. Fear of saying what's actually going on, then people will see you differently. And I think this is exactly why, many men only speak when things have gone too far. When the relationship's already catastrophically broken, when the addiction has already taken hold, or when, the debt has already piled up to the eyeballs and over your head and now it's insurmountable. When the anger has already caused too much damage, when the mental health is collapsed, essentially. Asking for help earlier can help prevent this, and it doesn't make you less of a man. It might be one of the most responsible things you can actually do, because if you've got children or people who depend on you, people who care about you, or even just the future version of you that you're trying to protect, then dealing with your problems matters. Not avoiding them, not numbing them, not pretending that they aren't there, just facing them. Sometimes facing them might be just one conversation, one honest message to someone you trust, or a phone call, one admission that says, I'm not doing very good right now. And that doesn't mean you need to tell everybody everything, because I definitely wouldn't recommend that, as I've spoken on that sort of thing in another video. It doesn't mean you need to collapse publicly and pour yourself out onto, the internet. It doesn't mean you stop being strong either. It just means that you stop lying to yourself and you open the door to the problem. Real strength isn't pretending you don't need anything. Real strength is just being honest enough to sort of deal with what's actually happening. And I think men generally need more places and more people where they can talk to without being mocked, judged, or instantly told just to man up. you know. If any of this is resonating with you, then, you know, feel free to subscribe. It's free. I'm uploading daily at the moment, and this channel is all about sort of rebuilding discipline, mindset, and things like that. And I would say, if you're a man and you're watching this and you know something isn't right, you know, if you're drinking more than you want to, or if you're angry all the time, or if you're avoiding your life, if you're struggling with money, if you're lonely, if you feel like you're losing control, or even if you just don't feel like yourself anymore, you know, say something. Say something to somebody you trust, whether it's your friend, whether it's a brother, whether it's your dad, whether it's to a coach or to a professional. Someone you trust, you know. You don't have to explain it perfectly, you don't have to say the right words, you don't have to know exactly what it is. You just start with, I'm struggling a bit right now. And that's, again, enough to just open the door to the problem. And once you've opened the door to the problem, you can actually start doing something about it. Because ultimately the goal isn't to be the man who never struggles, because that is inextricable on earth in this life. The goal is to simply be the man who tells the truth early enough to do something about it. You know, ask for help before the damage gets any bigger. Speak before silence turns into something heavy. You know, and I would say, lastly, to finish the video, remember that asking for help isn't weakness, you know. And it might save you a whole bunch of heavier things down the line. Because ultimately you are responsible for what happens if you keep ignoring the fact that you do, or you may need some help. Bit of a heavier video today, but that's that.